morning and welcome into the show. It is Daniel Wertman coming to you live from the Dreamadginate Sports Studios. It is 8 a.m. on the East Coast. This is your 5 a.m. super early morning wake-up call. Hope you're having a great morning so far, or if you're watching this from somewhere else around the world, thanks for tuning in on this Monday, the first Monday in February. Last night was Super Bowl Sunday, and I'm sure all you 49ers fans were thinking, all right, we're up 10. We got a good shot at the Super Bowl. And the NFL's best quarterback right now, Patrick Mahomes, said, not so fast, my friend. And in the words of Lee Corso, college game day and football legend, and Patrick Mahomes just got things going. Didn't have the best of games to kind of go through three quarters, but with about 7 minutes left in the game, just kind of went crazy. And Kansas City Chiefs are Super Bowl champions. A friend of mine was at the Super Bowl, a big Chiefs fan, grew up in Kansas City. Obviously he's younger and never experienced a Super Bowl, much less a Super Bowl championship. And he was there, and I was happy for him, excited for him. I know he's on cloud 9, 10, 12, 50, 100, whatever at this stage. Just elated that his team has won, and so happy for him. But it was Super Bowl Sunday. I don't know if you watched or not. I watched a little bit of the game. It was okay in terms of a game, but the funny thing is hearing someone call themselves a world champion when they only play in America. Speaking of the global sport, the real sport of football, the one that you actually use your feet on, some things did take place this weekend that I do want to get to. First and foremost, Liverpool kept rolling in the Premier League, winning 4-0, 0-0 at half. Weren't great in the first half, but got things going in the second half. And ended up just kind of rolling through Southampton as the game wore on, 4-0. Afterwards, Klopp was asked about his team and where they are. And the thing about Jurgen Klopp, the reason why this team's playing so well, the reason why managers at this level are at this level and having success are comments like this from Jurgen Klopp, where he said that Liverpool are not perfect, not even close. They're always looking for the edge. They're always looking for finding a way forward, finding a way to do it better, etc. And Liverpool are just continuing down that path. Unbelievable what they have done so far, where they've really been over the last couple of years, but even in the last, I would say, 18 months, the consistency, and then this Premier League season in particular, just unreal where they've been. And Manchester City's not been able to match them this year. A little bit of age, a little bit of injury problems for sure, and they're just nowhere close. They lose away at Tottenham, which I know Pep is not going to be happy with because he lost to his nemesis, Jose Mourinho. And losing 2-0 meant that they fell 22 points behind Liverpool in the table. Second place, 22 points back. Leicester City drawing Chelsea 2-2 are now 24 points back in third place in the table. It's unbelievable the run that Liverpool's been on over the course of the season. Excellence, just time after time. Unbelievable. Barca's Ansu Fati became the youngest to score a brace in La Liga, and that was pretty cool. 2 assists on his goals, winning against Levante 2-1, with Levante getting a late goal at the end, both set up by none other than Leo Messi. just to see the consistency of Messi is much like seeing the consistency of Liverpool. It is, you don't get there by accident, for sure. And just really, really, really amazing stuff this weekend. We typically go a little bit longer in our opening segments, but today I wanted to kind of set aside some time to really get into a bunch of topics with a friend of the show and a guest on the show today, Kartik Krishner. So we are going to kind of jump into this a little bit earlier than we normally do because there's so many topics we want to cover and get into, and I'm glad that he's able to be with us today and really do a deep dive on some things. So that is coming up just after the break, our conversation with Kartik Krishner. But before we get there, our sponsor this half hour is Ductic Brand, DUKTIG brand.com. If you don't know about Ductic Brand, you've been sleeping under a rock for a while because we talk about them each and every show. You should check them out at ducticbrand.com. Check out their products. I use them regularly. They are really, really good resources for coaches, players, etc. And when you place an order, use promo code DWShow and you will get 10% off of your order at ducticbrand.com. We'll be right back with Kartik right after this. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for tuning in on this Monday morning. I am really happy and excited, as always, to welcome to the show a friend of the show, friend of mine, Kartik Krishner. Kartik, how are you this morning?
Dan, it's great to be with you. It's a wonderful way to start a new year. Well, I guess we're starting the second month of the new year, but it's my first time with you in 2020. So great to be with you.
Great to have you on. It's always a privilege and a good chat with you because we go all around different topics and take a look at different aspects of not just American soccer but global soccer and how American soccer relates to global soccer. Just all these different aspects and. Just really always enjoy these chats. I know recently I was unable due to some schedule conflicts to make it to the United Soccer Coaches coaching convention. Had a ton of friends there. Was really disappointed I couldn't go. But I know that you were able to get there and check things out and meet people, hang out with people, talk to people, etc. What were your thoughts about this year's coaches convention and what did you see? What were you expecting to see? And how did you kind of come out of that coaches convention in terms of your, looking at the landscape of American soccer?
Well, I'm real upbeat leaving Baltimore, leaving the coaches convention, Daniel, because I had this fear, and the fear was reinforced from talking to people who cover MLS, cover USL, cover the men's professional game, that coaches convention, NSCAA, as we used to call it now, United Soccer Coaches, had lost some of its luster because they didn't have the MLS draft there. They don't have USL doing a big song and dance like they've historically done at that conference. Although they did have Super Y there still, but USL as a league used to have a huge booth, used to be involved with some of the sessions there. They didn't have any Jose Mourinho or Sir Alex Ferguson type figures coming to coach, coming to teach any coaching clinics or classroom sessions. So people were telling me, well, it's not really going to be the same. I haven't been to a coaches convention in a few years. I used to go regularly between 2008 and 2015. I went, I think, every year, maybe missed 1 year in there. And since 15, 16, that time period, I haven't been going. So it was good to reconnect. Quite frankly, the show was as big as I remember. MLS not being there didn't make a difference in the bigger scheme of things. NWSL still did their draft there. All the college coaches on the women's side were there because, of course, they had players that were going to get drafted in NWSL in the draft, and NWSL still, as a league, had made a commitment to be part of the coaches convention. So that was good. I still saw every state association there, basically. Saw the majority of D1 men's and women's college coaches there. Maybe under less than a majority of D2 and D3, but still enough D2, D3 coaches, some NAIA coaches. Lots and lots of academy coaches, particularly ECNL and DAs on the East Coast, both on the boys and girls side, and saw even met some high school coaches and also some young aspiring players, college players, high school players that were let in, academy players that were let into the show on Saturday. So the coaches convention has not lost any of its oomph. I know after 2018, where it was kind of the focal point for the presidential election, which obviously you were involved with, Daniel, and then the MLS pulling their draft out, the thought was, okay, it's not quite the same event, but it was still really good. Still saw really all the movers and shakers from past years there. Now, U.S. Soccer wasn't involved. We know that there's been some tension between the United Soccer coaches and U.S. Soccer over curriculums, over coaching certifications and badges, as well as disputes between state associations and U.S. Soccer over the governance of the game. But it seems like the United Soccer coaches is still a hub that and still a institution that everybody trusts outside of maybe the federation itself and MLS. So everybody was there. The executives from Nike, Puma, Capelli, all the apparel brands, etc. They were all. So the summation would be the fear that MLS not being part of the show and USL not being a prominent part of the show and the convention would make it a lesser event is certainly not the case. And I think, as you know, and all the listeners know, this is really, if you go outside the direct MLS Cup, MLS All-Star Game type events, this is the biggest event here in soccer. And MLS not being there didn't change that at all.
In terms of that, that's actually something I want to zero in for just a second. MLS and the USL not having a big presence there at all compared to years past. When we look at the convention, it's always been one, and you mentioned this. It's the largest gathering of all cross sections of American soccer on an annual basis. There is no other gathering like this on this scale on an annual basis. And when you look at that, and then you recognize, as you brought up, that MLS and USL have basically tried to say, well, this thing doesn't really matter that much to us. When you're having such a cross section of, from the grassroots into professional, into media, into college, etc. When you're looking at all of those aspects of representation throughout American soccer, and MLS and USL. I get maybe we don't want to have the draft there or whatever, but not having any kind of like real organic, like not just investment, but like building relationships, because these are people that should be your fans, and be supportive of your efforts. Them not being there, how did people notice? Did they even notice? And if they did notice, what was the conversations like concerning the fact that they really weren't such a big part of this convention?
Yeah, so, and that was interesting. Some people didn't care. Some people didn't notice. They are very much in their own worlds in terms of if you're a high level academy coach or director of coaching or involved in the college game, maybe your world still revolves around was that the draft would happen at coaches convention, preseason would start the next week. DC United, they're and Philly, the clubs from around that area, around Baltimore, did have executives running around the convention, but we have what? I can't even keep track anymore. 25, 26 MLS teams now. There were 3 or 4 teams. The Galaxy got their own booth in the exposition hall, which was that was an interesting move, because previously MLS had their own booth and the clubs had not had individual booths. The Galaxy, I guess with MLS pulling out, decided they needed to maintain their presence at the conference. So they attended and they bought a booth on the floor. There was some feeling that it was disrespectful. There were some other people telling me, well, this just shows that USL and MLS both think that they've either made it or they're in their own ecosystem where what happens with everyone else doesn't matter. Yet we know that the academies that their academies compete with and are in leagues with were all at this convention. We know that the colleges and universities that they draft players from were all at this convention. So it was a little, and people were not thinking favorably of what MLS and USL did. But again, I think the women's game, and we've talked about this before, the women's game is just more connected to the grassroots in this country at this point than the men's game is, right? Than the men's professional game. So,
of the worldview and kind of thought process within Major League Soccer, and to a lesser extent the USL, but they're kind of interconnected, even though separate entities, not always the best of friends, but kind of cohabitants in the professional soccer space, and just kind of this, like, we're doing our thing and everyone else is beneath us, and even the USL has that kind of view on other leagues, other professional leagues, amateur leagues, other aspects of soccer, and I just look at this as a out and out failure of the federation to lead in so many ways, and not saying that the federation is responsible for Major League Soccer or the USL not having a big presence at the coaches convention, but more to the point of saying that the federation has created, either by its intention or by its omission of leadership, to create an environment that has allowed this kind of disconnected, I call it, American soccer silos to exist, where, and entities just think like, there's not a purpose for us to go to something like this. I mean, if I was running Major League Soccer, I would make sure that every single one of my teams were represented. We had booths all over the convention hall, that we had players, making appearances. Like, I would be trying to do everything to build and grow the league. We know that the TV ratings are abysmal compared to their counterparts.
Brought up to me by one or two people who used to work in MLS who were at the convention was, hey, you're saying we're not here anymore, and they know I know this because I had gone to the convention, as I said, for 7 or 8 consecutive years when MLS was doing their draft there. But they both said to me, hey, the MLS people were always kind of arrogant. They'd show up and do the draft, maybe hang out for another couple hours, and then they'd leave town because they were too important to be part of the actual coaches convention side of it, which was when college coaches and DA coaches are going to clinics and doing their certifications and doing classroom sessions and doing field sessions. And then you have an exposition hall that has a lot of amateur and college people around. So I hadn't really thought about that until that moment that, yeah, that's true. They would have a presence at the convention, but they would all leave except for the people who were actually manning the booths that they had set up. So that's another point, which I think they almost think it's beneath them to be around this crowd and a part of everything that is going on in the grassroots sphere of American soccer and in the governance sphere. I do think it was interesting to see Adidas maintain their presence at the convention. They have to, right? These are their customers. The Adidas presence in the convention before MLS was created. I mean, obviously, soccer wasn't as big in this country at the grassroots level in the late 1980s as it is in 2020. But you could have walked around that convention and not known that there was a men's first division pro league in this country, and yet you still would have bumped into about 10,000 people. So I think that says a lot.
It really does. And, kind of segueing from that philosophy of Major League Soccer and kind of their disdain for the common folk of American soccer, which is so ironic. It's so weird to me because these are the people that, if this is Steve Jobs and he shows up, he's trying to turn all these people into Apple evangelists because they're already Apple, toting, Apple buying customers. And he's like, hey, go buy more, go tell the world about us, make you an army of Apple evangelists. And yet Don Garber has the opposite mentality. Like, these are the people that could help you for free. Like, you don't even have to pay them. For free, they could grow the game and grow your game, your markets, your teams, your followers. I mean, all of these aspects, and it's just ignored. And which really brings me to another point of this, which is, and we've talked about this before on the show, and we've discussed it as well on the show when you've been on the show and off air as well. Soccer United Marketing, the second piece of Major League Soccer. It's a separate company, but it is owned by the same ownership of Major League Soccer, and it is the company that has the no bid 6,500 tickets in terms of actual attendees. The attendance looked under 2,000. Some estimated as low as 1,000 people at the match for the U.S. men's national team. And this is a team that Soccer United Marketing is responsible for promoting, and yet other games have been thrown together kind of last minute, outdrawing, getting more support, more coverage, more viewers, etc. I mean, on any metric, Soccer United Marketing is a failed soccer promoter, soccer marketing company in the landscape, and without their no bid contracts with the U.S. Soccer Federation as well as with the Mexican Federation, I mean, I don't even see how the company itself would even be viable to operate, because they do such a poor job of actually doing the marketing and promotion piece. What did you see in terms of this weekend, in the coverage, in the attendance, and what did you hear anything else behind the scenes in regards to where?
But I think that's just because those people are soccer crazy and they watch whatever's on. The promotion of this national team has been so over the top by Soccer United, marketing this national team through audience of more sophisticated soccer fans than they were marketing to 10 years ago in this country, basically saying it's some sort of great privilege to support your team, one nation, one team, all this rhetoric that they have, this marketing slogan, and essentially, what a privilege. You should be willing to pay hundreds of dollars. The average ticket price for U.S. friendlies are higher than the world champion French men's national team charges for their Euro qualifiers. It's absurd. So you pay more for a friendly against the Costa Rica B team than France does for a qualifier against, let's say, Spain or Italy in the Euros. They still feel that the American soccer audience is unsophisticated, excessively nationalistic, to where they're going to believe how great this national team is, what a great young coach Berhalter is, and continue to overhype their players, particularly the players that come from MLS. But they do it with the European-based players also, because ultimately they just want to try and fool the public into believing that the player pool that the men's national team has is far better than it is. And I think the fans are now sophisticated enough and have been burnt enough in the last several years to say, no, that's not the case. We're not going to pay over the moon to see this national team. And then you talk about the media side of it, the ESPN and Fox side of it. We know, and you know this better than anyone, Daniel, when there have been critics of the national team or critics of the federation on broadcasts, like Eric Winalda when he was at Fox, they get taken off the broadcast. I was actually talking to an NBC executive who had told me that when a U.S. game was on. So go figure that one out. I mean, but actually, ESPN isn't as bad as Fox. When you watch a national team game on Fox, you are watching a piece of propaganda. And it is propaganda designed to elevate any MLS player that's playing for either team. I mean, mostly the U.S. team, but especially when they play other CONCACAF teams, obviously there's a fair number of MLS players. And then to overhype the level of the U.S. player playing in Europe. So the people who aren't watching the Bundesliga closely or the leagues in England, the Premier League and the Championship closely, may not realize how little some of these Americans actually play for their teams. But if you watch a U.S. men's national team broadcast, and of course the media contract also comes through some, I guess should point that out. It's not just the marketing deal that comes through some. I mean, some controls everything, right? So they control the media rights, they control the marketing rights, they control the sponsorship. There's this very, particularly when games are on Fox, carefully scripted set of talking points that you see them adhering to during the broadcast. And I think most American fans now have just tuned that out. I mean, even a lot of MLS fans. I mean, I used to think that most MLS fans were complicit with this propagandizing by Fox and the Federation. But actually, I'm finding a lot of MLS fans have grown up in the last couple of years, and they may still not quite get their heads around the idea of why we need an open system in this country and why we need to change the way the game's governed and structured in this country completely. But they are coming around to the view that the league and the national team and the federation aren't quite as good as they're made out to be. So because of that, I know this has been a long-winded answer, but I think the federation, unless they keep getting these kind of green, young fan types and have a continuous cycle of it, I think that they're going to have a lot of trouble. And at some point, maybe that breaks the dam. Let's hope.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with your assessment there. And one of the things that really drives me crazy when trying to watch, the coverage of American soccer on American soccer broadcasts. So that could be the U.S. men's, women's national teams, any kind of youth national team coverage, or Major League Soccer, the USL, for example. One of the things that just really kind of baffles me is if you were to watch any of the networks that cover American soccer, they are multi-sport networks that are doing this. So your ESPNs, your Foxes, etc. They cover other sports. NFL, college football, American football at large, the NBA, college basketball, baseball, Major League Baseball, college baseball, hockey, etc. It doesn't matter, professional, amateur. if a program is not being run well, if a league is not being run well, if the job these networks are doing in comparison to the other sports that they cover, and you cannot honestly look at the coverage and go, man, they are telling the truth about why Major League Soccer is not attracting crowds of 40, 50,000 throughout the league, why they're not blowing away TV numbers and they're stagnant or falling, why the U.S. men's national team can't get more than 1,000 fans at a game in Southern California when there is no other domestic men's competition on a soccer side of things interfering at all. Major League Soccer, USL is all on hiatus, and every other league that is being watched are leagues taking place, across the ocean. So, I mean, the fact that in what people in Southern California like to proudly say is the hotbed of American soccer, and you can't get more than 1,000 people to show up for a U.S. men's national team match, even if it is a friendly, and not have that critically examined. Why? Dig into, the reasons for these consistent, failures on behalf of the federation, its marketing and television partner and Soccer United Marketing that is, set up these deals. Why is the coverage not giving us really, really deep looks? The only time I can think of in the last few years where I felt like there was a real consistent across the board willingness to at least ask the questions. It may not have gone as far as some of us would like, but it was at least asking real questions and really showing concern and frustration and really wanting to, at the very least, to take a deep look at why we are where we are was, the night of October 10th, 2017, when we failed to qualify for the World Cup in Russia. That night, that is what you see every day. If you turn on ESPN or Fox, NBC Sports, CBS, any sport that they're covering, you're seeing this deep dive into something. Recently with baseball and just the coverage of the scandal of, cheating and stealing signals and, heads rolled and people were gone. I mean, World Series winning manager out. The World Series winning manager in Boston out. In this coverage of should these guys be banned for life, and what did they do, and what did they know, and when did they know it, and just really trying to dig into details and really look at things. There is a much longer list of things that we could look at. Constant either lawsuits taking place or rumors of lawsuits taking place within the federation, many directly with the federation, and yet anytime you turn on the TV and you're having any kind of domestic coverage, there's no real talk about the issues, really looking at where we are. And without it, I just think people are like, look, you can sit here and pretend. You can try to live in a world of make-believe, but we know the truth. And the truth is things don't add up. And until you're willing to be honest with us, we are certainly not going to give you our time, attention, or our money. It just really aggravates me because I think it's necessary to move the country forward, even if we don't necessarily agree on all the steps that we need to take and exactly where we need to go from a system standpoint, from a federation standpoint, etc. I think we can all agree that soccer is nowhere near reaching its potential, and if that is the conclusion you come to, then we can have a discussion on what to do going forward. But we can't sit here and act like everything's fine at the same time. The lack of competitive bidding and the lack of results shown by Soccer United Marketing and just giving them another no-bid contract, at that point, I think you just got to call for an all-out boycott of the federation at that point because they are not acting in the best fiduciary duties of their members. Speaking of kind of looking at the landscape of American soccer, NISA, a league that got underway 2019, finally got going and, had some growing pains as expected. We have taken a really good, I feel like an honest look at the league and some of the challenges it's faced, some of the changes it needs to look at recently. Had Chris Kivlahan, who had written a really good in-depth piece kind of digging into the nuts and bolts and the weeds of the league and the teams and individual things. And we really kind of looked at that and examined where the league is. What are your thoughts on NISA, the only league operating professionally on the men's or women's side in American soccer that basically is fully embracing independent clubs as coming together to form a league rather than a franchise or single entity model?
Yeah, it's the only collection of independent clubs in the professional space, men's and women, in this country, which is why I think working on the grassroots for reform, on the grassroots level for reform in this country, know that. But I think this is why it's so important NISA be successful, because it will forever be held up, much like the where the league office has an incredible amount of control over the way everything works. I think NISA is in a position now with the addition of the New York Cosmos, Michigan Stars, Chattanooga FC, and Detroit City, where they have not only independent clubs, but they have some of the strongest independent brands in the American soccer space. And so the four clubs that are really the core of that independent movement, Oakland, Chattanooga, Detroit, Cosmos, along with Miami FC, who's moved to USL but was in NISA last year, and Jacksonville, who Jacksonville Armada, who now have a stadium to look forward to, and we'll see what they do in terms of their professional ambitions and moving back into the professional game. Currently, they field teams in NPSL and UPSL, connected to their academy, which is a DA academy. But I know Robert Palmer now will have a professional team again. It's just a matter of whether it'll be in NISA or in one of the USL leagues. But when you talk about the core independent clubs that have made it a point to promote reform and a change in the structure of how the game is governed in this country, the majority of those clubs are currently in NISA. So it's, I think, an important thing now, whether or not necessarily feel like the leadership of NISA, the Club 9 back leadership, and then the leadership connected to the LA club, whose nickname is escaping me, but it was FC Golden State when they were in NPSL and in
is that the LA Force?
Force, that same boardroom, and with the fact that Friedland is a successful soccer guy. I mean, he runs, as I said, one of the largest youth soccer. I should say it's not one of the largest youth soccer systems in the country, but it's one of the largest academy systems, right? Their teams, as far as their academy teams playing at a high level, it's one of the largest systems in the country. You have really the framework of a lot of good independent clubs. And I think, however the league gets on, the league has to get on for any sort of also competitive purposes. I think there are a lot of owners of amateur teams who have their amateur teams connected to academies that would like to be in a professional league, but do not want to be in what they perceive a very restrictive franchise-based league like USL. And they're not going to make a jump to NISA until they know NISA is stable and viable long-term. But if that stability is accomplished by NISA in the next year or two, I think the floodgates could open on independent clubs coming into that league and becoming Division III level professional clubs. Maybe they can even build out their own pyramid. And then some of the competitive landscape we want. I mean, ultimately, we'd like to have a unified pyramid where there's promotion and relegation, there's solidarity payments, the calendar is realigned, all of these important things. But if we're not going to have that in one fell swoop, I think NISA's viability long term is really important, creating the kind of competition for USL at D2, D3, D4, and below. And maybe NISA can team up with NPSL and UPSL and whoever else. I know there have been conversations between NPSL and NISA. Nothing's been consummated, but that possibility is always there. I think if NISA can prove, so I think ultimately these developments will be good for all of American soccer on the men's side. I think it is so important NISA survives. There are people who have qualms about the people whoever runs the league, Club 9, some of the owners. I would urge people to just, nothing. It's not ideal. It's not perfect, maybe for you, but to support that league and hope that league can survive and create some genuine competition in the lower division landscape.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at where the league is, and the aspirations of the league, knowing a lot of those guys involved in the league in terms of the teams that are now playing, or about to play, who have recently joined, like the Cosmos. To me, I look at a project like NISA, and there's a load of potential. I mean, just a world of potential there. It's at this point, it's about executing. Making sure the execution is done well, that it's consistent, that it is sound and solid. For all the criticism that you can have, and I personally, don't like a franchise system. I don't like a single entity system in the way that Major League Soccer does it. For all of that you look at, when you look at those leagues like Major League Soccer and the USL, the one thing that they figured out, at least for their internal operations. Now, again, we can go through, some internal operations for teams having some level of support in that as well. That is the area where I think if NISA can, set aside the sponsorships and the TV and the media rights and all that, no one in American soccer has gotten that part right. So, take a deep breath. You don't have to freak out over that right now. If you can just get the league functions, its social media presence, its internal operations, and its support of its teams to make sure there's a professional and polished and consistent media presence in social media platforms, that the functions and operations internally of the league are, laying the foundation for the future. If those things can really start to get put in place and get solidified, then I think you would see a lot of teams go, you know what? Let's figure this thing out together. Let's kind of like come together and do, what could really be done. So I think there's a load of potential here. I am, a big fan of the idea on a macro level. For me, it is purely and completely at this stage of the game about execution. And I hope the league will take steps and continue to take steps to build a solid foundation, to get things on solid ground, and really start to elevate the fan experience, national teams, Soccer United marketing, etc., even NISA. When you look at American soccer at large for 2020, and out on our own, we're not getting leadership from somewhere else, and let's come together. If you could kind of look into your crystal ball and look at 2020 and maybe a year or two down the road, are you hopeful or are you pessimistic on the potential of starting to get things sorted within American soccer?
I think I'm optimistic in the sense that I think at the lower division level, there's becoming a realization that that there has to be some sort of different structure. There has to be a loosening of the reins. We're going to see in the next year or two. I fear for the fans of these clubs and for the owners of these clubs that are under the gun. But we're going to see many of the well, I shouldn't say many, but a few of the really touted USL clubs that have come into existence, let's say in the last 5 years, begin to run into a brick wall in terms of their ability to grow their business, their ability to attract new fans, their ability to attract new sponsors. I think we're seeing some of these clubs already. I don't want to name them per se, but some clubs that have been established in recently hit a wall after year 3 or 4 in the USL. Some, including clubs that have come from the NASL. So maybe that gives away who 1 or 2 of them is, but are. I think when those owners hit the brick wall and they're not able to either finance a new stadium project, which will then give them a couple more years of a cycle for a couple more years, or sell the team, you might see them push for some sort of institutional change in a way that they haven't in the past, when they've been very comfortable with the leadership of U.S. soccer and the structure which they have paid into, but they don't get anything back from. Right? I mean, you talk about paying $7 to $10 million for a USL franchise, and again, it's money for a piece of the single entity business, and you also then have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on stadium and infrastructure projects, and so I think we might see a change in the next few years as owners get frustrated. The one thing that gives me pause and hesitation on that, Daniel, is that I know a lot of these owners don't really care about soccer and are involved in land grabs or land deals. And if you're just involved in land deals, USL and MLS look like great deals for you, right? They give you some sort of entree to justify land acquisition and get government assistance with that, and then flip the land potentially. But I think for those owners that are committed to this sport and growing this sport, they're going to get frustrated. And I'm not saying they're going to be 10 teams that fold in USL or lead the league. What I am saying is that there might be 10 or 12 owners in USL that say, hey, we want a different structure for the elite teams. We want a little more control over our business. Maybe that's the USL Premier League, since they followed the English model to this point with Championship League 1, League 2. Maybe there's a USL Premier League that sits in the space above the championship, or the championship thins itself out, and those other teams move down to League 1 and League 2. I'm not even thinking about U.S. soccer sanctioning and pro league standards here. I guess maybe there would be a block put on USL having a Premier League, right, because of the pro league standards and U.S. soccer sanctioning and cohabitation agreement with MLS via some. But I am hopeful that we're going to see a lot of owners kind of change their perspectives as they hit a brick wall. And the things that you were talking about, Daniel, 3-4 years ago, and that your candidate that you're running the campaign for U.S. soccer president 2 years ago was talking about, I am optimistic that 2-3 years from now, USL owners can
for day in and day out is, I just hope that we turn a corner, that we realize our potential. I've said this so many times, and it's not a slogan for me. It is a sincere belief. I believe that American soccer, that our country can be the greatest soccer country on earth. We are the biggest and the greatest sports economy on earth, and if we ever figure it out and get it right, I think that we will explode in terms of excitement, engagement, fans, the kind of players that would want to play here. But it's going to take us, doing those self-evaluations and really, really examining where we are, who we are, what we want to be when we grow up. That kind of phrase. I mean, like, if we really got to do some real work in that area. But I'm hopeful that we do get there, and that your optimism and your sense of looking at these different aspects and seeing what could be. I hope we at least begin to see some signs of progress in some areas that maybe are swirling under the light right now, but will be shining bright here at some point in the future. Kartik, thanks for coming on the show. As always, I love having you on. There's so much more that we could talk about and need to talk about, and I'll have to have you back on again soon to do that. How can people connect with you on social media and follow your work?
Yeah, KKFLA737 is the best place on Twitter.
Really appreciate you spending some time with us, and I'm hopeful like you are. So we'll see how 2020 turns out. But again, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Daniel, as always, to keep up the good work.
Absolutely appreciate it. That is Kartik Krishner. Really appreciate him spending some time with us. He, as he mentioned, you can follow him, follow his work, and you should. Do yourself a favor and do that. Speaking of doing good work, Charity Water does great work, and they provide clean drinking water to people all over the world. You can learn more at charitywater.org. We'll be right back after this.
No one, no man, no woman, no child should ever have to drink green water with bugs, with algae, with disease in it. Bad water and a lack of toilets kills more people than all the wars in the world. We know how to brutally transforms them. It changes everything.
.com. You can catch me on Twitter or Instagram at Daniel Workman. Thanks for watching the show. As always, we will see you again tomorrow.
पहिला म पनि बच्चा अवस्थामा रहँदाखेरि मैले यो कल्पना गरेको थिइनँ कि तर अहिलेको बच्चाहरूलाई मैले सोद्धाखेरि अथवा उनीहरूलाई क्लासमा गएर तिमी के भन्ने भनेर भन्दाखेरि उनीहरू बच्चाहरूले एक क्लास 2